Mythomania, small apparatus. The reasons behind this work are unknown to me, but the path it is taking, both demonstrative and absurd, makes this journey, and the vectorization of the emergences coming from non-formulated hypotheses, the only reason possibly able to validate them. There is no plausible psychological explanation, nor a causal connection between the object and the situation. These two are satisfied by their unstable equilibrium between the space, not to be understood in the modern sense, and the biological body. They share a psyche, non-dissociable from a state of dependency, of correlation, which cannot be described as a domination system, but as a belonging, a co-belonging. The coupled space body isn't dedicated to a projection, one onto the other, but instead proceeds by coextensions, coexistences, in a fold of Arto. The crime scene is crossed by intimacies, extimacies, and the architecture snakes in and through their flux and reflux. The shelter is no longer dedicated to insularity, a sort of bunker at the service of a vague attempt at the safety of the biological body. It is itself coming from its biologies and allows, via its apparatus, the certainty of transaction, of raw materials and subjectivation. A small osmotic machine, symbiotic and psychic. The places, the bodies, and the misunderstandings vibrate through their reciprocity, their catatonic stuttering. We are pulled and pushed in a contradictory mode of exchange, where we cannot romanticize the lost natures, the idealized Holocene, condemned now to evolve in additive subtractive mode, where we are definitely shaping the planet with our substances, be it physical, psychological, physiological, where even a psyche has to be counted in the balance. The natures of this Anthropocene are a source of feedback backlash vibrations, for a kind of echo-machinist masochism in the double paradox of l'above, both observed and observing, object and subject, actor and spectator, vector of this mise en abîme. In positive entropy, no reverses. Psychotic machines, psychotic apparatuses and fragments, bodies in verse, bodies becoming, are meeting in the stories of their symptoms, plausible. The forbidden is reintroduced as a possible, and what was rejected or considered as an improper ingredient within our computer graphic idealization of the world is coming back like a Georges Bataille substance, in a repulsive, curiouser and curiouser affinity, in the pursuit of the notion of risk of Ulrich Beck. The human being isn't anymore considered as a bio-eco-consumer, but he is drifting into a psycho-computing animal which defines its situation and condition of living simultaneously with the architecture's emergence, as a codependency, a co-relationship, for a Siamese twin alienation. Parapsychosis, projection of the mind, delusions and singularities seem more relevant. Lines of subjectivities versus functionalism, bodies versus body, substances versus shape, scenario versus concept, metaphysics versus pseudo-scientific positivism, vanitas versus naivism. Environments and paranoia as symptoms of an inner condition, in a constant exchange between narrative and emergence, in a stuttering process, a storytelling manifested in the creation of a fiction, which uses a fragment as a byproduct, and where a material structure with its physical characteristics takes shape and instructs the story. Each scenario is a condition of solitude in relation to symptomatic symptom, where the fragment is the very raison d'être of his or her emotion. The true story of an old Indian book collector exiled from his community under suspicion of atheism, who finds refuge in a tear-collecting shelter made of stones and lacrimatories, would have been my last complaint. The scientists captured in Anthropocene entropy, condemned to accept metempsychosis exchanges according to the first principle of the thermodynamic law, although in apnea. A monster boy endomorphed, constantly overfed, protected in a claustrophilic antidote jacket from the love excess of his incestuous mother, Bostrosity. The suspended time of Ariadne floating between two periods, two macho spirals, testosterone Theseus and alcoholic Dionysus, terra insola. The furled child, innocent, naive and obscene in a deep jungle, auscultated by scientism and voyeurism, the offspring. The difference and repetition of an affective alienation become cage food in the pursuit of Gilles Deleuze, some days. A post-culture spam in a mud-turd dirt where substances, human psyche and rejections meet in their various states of chemical transformation, concrete island, etc. Producing a shelter which produces a movie, and the movie at the origin of the shelter as a Siamese twin interlaced production between narration and topology, able to cross fabrication expertise and human pathologies to create the condition of a passage for navigation between elusive realism and speculative fiction, intertwined, interlocked as a storytelling developing two collateral effects, two artifacts. One by the potential to develop a fiction using an emerging structure as a byproduct, and the other on the tangible and tactile world by shaping an emergence which will construct the raison d'être of the story. The relationship, the permanent flux between the architecture becoming a prop of another production in another discipline and its own real and fictional footprint, unresisting to its own erosion, produces an indistinguishable transitory and transactional process of Siamese dialogue, where the two are sleeping in an osmotic, a symbiotic stuttering, schizoid protocols with immiscibility and autonomy, at the base of the birth of some twin fictional identity. So the mythomania of each situation, of each character, transforming environments with a parapsyche, confusing Plato's grotto, trajectories, lines of fiction and physicality. The architecture fragments are becoming the cartography of their mind, from where they could accept the shifting, the drifting, as a receptacle of their paranoia, but simultaneously as a vector, a shelter of their emotions. Reprogramming architecture with psychism, fear and emotions, relationship, aesthetic and exquisite corpses, placed into the abyss, to share this schizoid goal, storytelling and fabrication, but also to create a laboratory able to provide the conditions for using and manipulating sciences and fictions. On the side, experiences are undertaken in Bangkok through a fab lab, M4, including a 6-axis robot, multiple nozzles, a real sensor interface, a unit of fabrication as an architecture agenda, confronted to different biotopes and feedback, in a permanent challenge to articulate the contingencies of logic between the instrument tooling, as computation, as robotic, as the expertise of the design process, with, at the opposite, the discovery of the potential of a masochism adaptation, for a kind of situationist claim or depth, in a strategy tragedy of correlations, of codependencies, for prototyping discourses and substances, material and immaterial. In our merchandising time, when even the internet is becoming an egocentric GAFA TV show, through algorithms on cookies, likes, smileys, without omitting the mathematic codes at the origin of the subprime and data crisis, we are only left with mental spaces to defend ourselves. Reptilian atavisms, hostage to the society of the spectacle, mirror of our own reflection, selfish selfies in self-contemplation. What else could we do than to oppose the system's obscenity, the obscenity of our pathologies, generated by this very system, affected by an impossibility to the world, facing these multiple disorders, what we as well to say, to make say and make know, that we as well are pathogen elements of this very disorder, but in a critical mode, activist, solitary, to produce with this repulsion, this rejection, in a metabolized loop, constitutive of the obscene shame of these little tales. Yes, we are only left with obscenity in order to say, to make say, and make known. This is what we offer here, our pathologies as paranoid criticism. The obscenity is not so much a subject than the voyeurism apparatus which forces us to look at it frontally. In front of the miserabilism of cretinous niches with their hypocritical formulas, we have to re-evaluate what we used to call design as a process of synesthesia, of knowledge, crossing the multiple conflicts and embarrassing waste of ideology, criminal positivism, voluntary ignorance, performative cynicism, to secrete from this ambiguity, ambivalence, even nonsense, absurdity, where some words are definitely suspects relative to daily routine, such as expertise, accuracy, performance, optimization, communication, futuristic, future, innovation, speculation, improvement, absolute truth, parametric, post-human positivism, as the grail, onanism, and at the opposite, other words are vehicles for some kind of legitimacy, innocent injected into the daily routine. Dirty, filthy, X-rated, explicit, lewd, rude, vulgar, coarse, crude, offensive, immoral, improper, impure, off-color, degenerated, depraved, debauched, lubricious, indecent, smutty, salacious, carnal, lascivious, licentious, bawdy, and nostalgia, melancholia, metaphor, but also scatological, profane, porn, skin, vile, foul, atrocious, outrageous, heinous, odious, abhorrent, abominable, disgusting, hideous, offensive, objectionable, repulsive, revolting, repellent, loathsome, nauseating, sickening, awful, dreadful, terrible, frightful, and repugnant.